the plan that you had of what you were going to do goes out the window because circumstances change and location issues happen and whatever. And now you have less time than you thought to get the thing you were going to get, or the weather changes, something like that. And you have to find a way to make it work in that little bit of time that you have. And I've been in those situations so many times. It's
Mm.
like, and there's many times on episodic television where you do feel that you've got this kind of like gun to your head of time throughout the day where you're aware constantly of like we have this much time to get it. And the successful director DP partnerships are when you both understand that together, and you both, the director is also kind of like subconsciously aware of that without kind of like being kind of strangled by that like worry of the time, but you both are thinking constantly of like, okay, like every little bit of time we spend in the first few hours of the day is going to be time that we wish we had in the last hour of the day. So you're always thinking of like, you want to be quick and efficient. You don't want to like shortchange yourself for what you are trying to get creatively, but know that that extra take or those two or three extra setups that sometimes you think like, do we really need that? And that's often the directors that I've really found a good partnership with are the ones where you're both on the same page, where you're
Yep.
like, we got it. Like, you don't need another take because you know that extra 5 minutes or whatever, it all adds up. All those little 5 minute, 1 minute things that you're fussing over. If the director wants to keep fussing with something, at the end of the day, like oftentimes it's like it isn't really going to matter. You've got what you need. It's knowing when to move on because that at the end of the day, that time is going to be so precious that you've banked by not doing that extra take or that one extra shot that you maybe don't need.
Yeah. So the Stanley Kubrick 150 take method is yeah, I can see from your reaction.
It's a luxury that few people have. I mean,
Yeah.
you've got like, months of production schedule, and that's I mean that very few people have that luxury. You're those are the top 0.5% of the
Mhm.
filmmakers out there that have that luxury. The rest of us have the realities of time that we have to contend with, and
Mhm.
like Revenant is an example of that. They made that decision of shooting as much as possible at magic hour or in, so they would basically, it took them, they spent 9 months making that film.
Mhm.
That if it was a smaller budget film, you'd have like 6 weeks to shoot
Mhm.
that, and you'd have to shoot it in whatever time of day it is. But they had the time and the money and the clout to say we're only shooting this at the right time of day. And that movie was like mostly magic hour, so
Mhm.
that gives you got like an hour or two a day to shoot maybe, and you spend most of it rehearsing and planning, and then you're getting little tiny pieces of the film per day.
Yeah, like a Terrence Malick production.
Yeah,
Just yeah.
same.
I'd love to go back just for a second. Just it's so rare the people that we've talked to that for someone to last years on a show.
Mm.
You lasted the
Hmm.
whole run. So was there something? Was it that relationship with the directors? Was it producers? Was it just your own something? Like what allowed you to do that grind versus saying, you know what, I've done 3 years. Let me go work on a film or doc or do something else. What kept you there that whole time?
I mean, the funny thing is, when I did the first season, I thought I'll just do the one and that's it. I'm
Yeah.
not a TV guy. I'm not gonna go into this world. I think what I realized, like Narain said something to me early on, like in my first season, our showrunner, and he was the showrunner for the whole run. And I learned a lot from him and how, because Narain has a huge experience of having done like CSI, and I mean, he really is one of the top showrunners out there. And he said, remember, you are like, I'm not going to be there very often. You are the sort of the visual gatekeeper of the show. And I kind of look at you as like my deputy when I'm not there. And remember too, of the first two seasons of Expanse, I did them by myself. I didn't have an alternate
Mm.
DP, which at the time I didn't know any better. And I mean, it was crazy that I did that. But I did. And after the second season, I'm like, I can't do that anymore. But Narain gave me that lesson of you have that responsibility. You are like, if anything is going wrong that's weird, or something's not the way that a director's making a bad call on something, like, reach out to me and I will try and get involved. I'll do what I can. And I didn't think of it that way. I wasn't used to being told that I had that power and responsibility as a DP. But on an episodic show where you're sort of the lead DP and it started, it's like you are that person. And I didn't know, I hadn't thought of that yet. So over the course of that first season, and I got to the end of it, I realized we were building this world. We had all these books of story to tell, and I realized this is like a really rare opportunity where we have all this source material to work from. The guys who write it are involved with it. The showrunner is super smart, like collaborative guy that I've developed a relationship with, and what other thing can I do that's going to have that, you know? So that's when I decided to do the second season. And every year I'm like, well, should I go back again? Most of the people on that show, what came back, like when we finished, I think Jason Brown, one of our producers, said that from the first season to the last season, something like they had like 80% crew retention,
Wow.
which is that's like
Wow.
several hundred people
Yeah, it's amazing.
stayed. And that's very unusual for a show, an episodic TV show. And that speaks to the story we were telling, that everyone wanted to be there telling it, that the people running it were running it in a way that everyone wanted to stay and continue to work with them. It wasn't a toxic place. It was a functional, collaborative, enjoyable work environment. And that's why I kept going back. And it was always like, well, what else would I be doing? There was nothing else that came along that was better. And, you know, I did do other things in between. So I used the time I had off because we would have months of downtime between seasons. And the thing is, we never knew if the show was going to be renewed each season until the last second. So usually like we'd wrap, then there'd be like 3-4 months of post, and whatever the last window of time, like where the network had to tell us if we were being renewed or not, it was always like the midnight of the day before they would say, okay, you're renewed. So there'd be months in between where we all
Or
just didn't
Amazon
know.
picking it up, right?
And then Amazon after season 3, but with Sci-Fi originally, Sci-Fi wouldn't tell us until like literally their contractual final day of when they can tell us, which was like months after we
Wow.
wrapped. So nobody knew if we were going back to it each
The
year.
job insecurity is just for everybody. It's just got
It's job insecurity. So
Yeah.
I would take other things in between, and I made a conscious effort to take things that were very not sci-fi. You know, so I did The Long Road Home. I
Yep.
did The Boys. I did other things in between the seasons of Expanse, so I could kind of just try other things and not be just so the sci-fi person, you know. And I was asked to do Star Trek when the new Star Trek came along. I was asked to do the first season of Star Trek because I had just done The Expanse, and they were actually building. We were at Pinewood.
Which one, Picard or Strange New Worlds?
No, Next Generation. The first one, Next Generation.
Oh,
Discovery.
okay.
Sorry,
Discovery.
That was the first thing that they started, and they were actually building the sets at Pinewood. We were at Pinewood, and they were like across the way in the same complex building the sets for that. And so we were like seeing them building the sets while we were actually filming the first season of Expanse. And they asked me if I wanted to. Like I was approached by the show, and it was a tough decision, but I thought, well, here's a show that I'm on that we've built ourselves from the ground up. It's a small family. We're doing something new. I have a very good relationship with the creative team. If I go to Star Trek, they're basically wanting me to go to that show to take the ideas that I've got from Expanse and inject it into Star Trek to give it a new thing.
Interesting.
But I'd also would lose my creative power in a sense because it's a much bigger machine. It's a legacy show. You're dealing with a giant committee of people, and it's also something that's been done for decades. And I really felt that The Expanse was something special, and I should stay with it. So I against the better advice of some of my colleagues and representatives and stuff, they were like, what are you crazy? Like, you got to take this. This is the prestige show that everybody wants to be on. And I'm like, I think I should stay with The Expanse.
It's like all those not horror stories, but all those people who go on to work for Disney for Star Wars and they just feel trapped in the franchise, in the system.
Yeah.
They lose all their the reasons they were hired to begin with.
That's right. And I just knew, and that feeling stayed to the end. I had that level of creative control and collaboration with the showrunner and the people who ran the show. Like and in fact, my role kind of expanded and became more important as it went. So I felt like we were really empowered to tell this story in a way that I'm like, when am I ever going to get to do this again? I mean, I may never get to do this again, so I should stay with it.
So you strike me as somebody that has a strong sense of self, and maybe you're aware of it or not, but protects your mental health. You had an opportunity to go work on Star Trek, but at the same time, I'm happy here. I have control here. This is a 80% retention. People are happy here. It's you said it wasn't toxic, and I'm not saying Discovery was a toxic. I don't know, but you chose to work on a production that felt special to you and that you were satisfied doing this hard work with, where, yeah, you could go to something bigger, probably paid more money, but you're rolling the dice on whether this is going to be a happy experience. And that tells me that you know who you are.
Well, I was certainly aware of that yes, Star Trek had probably 2 or 3 times the money that we had and much bigger resources and everything. But I just thought this is still better. I'm happy here. And and from what I heard between people that I knew who went on to that show, that it was actually a very difficult show in terms of just mentally for people who went on to it. So I was like, okay, I kind of confirmed what I thought might happen. But that being said, like I certainly, because I had never done episodic television before, even with Expanse, as much as I loved it, I think what I had seen when I did Steadicam on those shows back in the 2000s is I met crew and others and cinematographers that I was working for as an operator, where I could just sort of get this sense of kind of like jaded bitterness from people. I could see it. I could in that world of like kind of the grind of like regular episodic television back in the early 2000s. And I remember at that time thinking like I never want to be that guy. I don't want to end up like that. So I that's why I avoided that world. But then once I started doing Expanse, as much as I loved it and I totally was invested in every way, there were certainly days after like months into the run each season where I started to think like, do I really enjoy this? Because there's, you got good days and bad days on anything. And even on a show that you love, you're still going to have days where you're not quite into it, or you've got a challenging thing and maybe there's like, it's just like there's bad days. There's days you just don't enjoy it as much. And when you've got such a long run, I started thinking like, well, is this now my career? Like now that I'm doing this, the writing on the wall to me is that this will be what I'm going to do for the next 10 years of my life. And everything I do now will be a 3 to 5 month or 7 month commitment where you're in it. Like you have to fully drink the Kool-Aid and you're buying into that. You have to go and eat and breathe and live that world every day. And I started to think like, well, do I have that in me? Like, do I actually, because I could feel the burnout, like little tinges of it coming. And will I survive this? But what else am I going to do? Like, what other kind of work can I do? This is what I love and this is my career. But when you do it that much and you do it that intensively, you definitely start to feel like the like this, the faint bits of burnout coming in and just feeling like your creative energy is running out. It's like I have to go in every day and be positive and inspired and have good ideas and problem solve. And that takes a lot, it takes a lot out of your personal life and your relationships with your family and friends and even your own partner. Like my partner, I mean, he knew what I was doing when I got into it, but it created stress for us at home. I mean, because even though he knew the drill and what I have to do, like it affected us for sure. And I look around, I see people all around me in the industry who had marriages fall apart and divorces, and it affects their children and all that. Like it is a very hard industry in that way because it takes you away from your family for such a long
Not
time.
just the hours. So many people are just going to other countries,
Yeah.
other locations. It's not like it's around the corner for everybody.
I mean, right now I'm 4 hours away from home and I won't be going home until this is over, which is in like 7 weeks. So I won't really see people for a long time. I'm very aware of it, and it still is an ongoing concern for me because every job I take, I think, okay, well, that's another 7 months or 6 months of my life, and how am I going to get through this? And do I have the creative energy to get through this? So I'm very selective, obviously, with what I take because I get offers for things all the time where I'm like, I can't see myself doing that for 5 months. I think you learn to start gauging yourself of like, what do I have this in me? You look at the project and what it is, and you think about what it's going to entail, and you think, do I love this enough that I'm going to make it to the other side? And it's an ongoing thing. I still am figuring that out. And I have, I turn 50 next year, and I think, okay, well, I've got another, I don't know, 15 years of this in me. Can I realistically do this for that long at the level that I want to do it at? And I think the answer is I have to do less. I have to work a bit less and to survive that, because it is a thing I think about of like mentally, how do I maintain that and not burn out, not become jaded? I mean, I pride myself in being not a yeller and collaborative with people and kind. And I mean, I really, our film set floors really need that. And I mean, I have to be the leader in that way because I run all those departments and so many people. So if I'm a bad person in that way, it affects everybody else. So I have to go that extra mile of like not wearing anything on my sleeve that is bothering me, which it means you end up kind of bottling stuff up, even if you're not having a good day. you still have to go in and smile and be positive and not lose